The throne room of the Galactic Empire stretched for nearly a kilometer. Golden pillars rose toward a ceiling painted with stars and ancient battles. Thousands of courtiers stood in perfect rows, their silk robes flowing like colored rivers across the marble floor. At the far end, upon a throne, carved from a single piece of black crystal, sat Queen Nari. She was young for a ruler, barely 300 years old by her people's count. Her silver hair fell past her shoulders, and her violet eyes watched everything with cold calculation. The Valari people lived for thousands of years, and they had ruled this part of the galaxy for longer than humans had walked upright. To them, other species were children playing at civilization. Today, the children had come to ask for help. The human delegation approaches. "Your Majesty," announced her chief advisor, a tall Valari named Lord Hyan. His voice carried across the vast chamber like a bell. Queen Nari straightened on her throne. She had read the reports about humans. They were a young species from a small planet called Earth. They lived short lives, barely a century if they were lucky. They had only discovered space travel 300 years ago. In the grand scale of galactic history, they were practically newborns, but newborns with sharp teeth. The humans had somehow survived first contact with the Darkhan Empire. They had fought a war that everyone expected them to lose. They had won. Nobody understood how. The Darkhan had destroyed civilizations 10 times older than humanity. Yet the humans remained, battered but breathing. Now they wanted an alliance with the Valari. The great doors at the far end of the throne room opened. Queen Nari watched as the human delegation entered. There were 7 of them. 6 walked in front, wearing formal black suits and carrying data tablets. They were diplomats, she could tell by the way they smiled and bowed, and looked around with practiced admiration. But it was the 7th human who caught her attention. He walked behind the others, slightly apart from the group. He wore simple gray armor that had seen better days. Scratches and dents covered the metal plates. His helmet was clipped to his belt, revealing a face that was neither young nor old. His black hair was cut short, and his dark eyes moved constantly, watching the pillars, the courtiers, the shadows. A soldier. A guard. Nothing more. Queen Nari dismissed him from her thoughts and focused on the lead diplomat, a woman with brown hair and a bright smile. "Your Majesty," the woman said, bowing deeply. "I am Ambassador Park Yuna of the Earth Federation. We are honored beyond words to stand in your magnificent presence." The Queen nodded slightly. "Flattery. How predictable." "You may rise, Ambassador," Nari said. Her voice was soft but carried to every corner of the room. "Tell me why humanity seeks an alliance with the Valari Empire." Ambassador Park stood straight and began her prepared speech. She spoke of mutual benefit, of trade routes, of cultural exchange. She spoke of the growing threat from the outer rim, where dark things stirred. She spoke of humanity's desire to learn from the wisdom of older civilizations. Queen Nari listened with half her attention. The other half wandered back to the soldier standing silently behind the diplomats. He was not looking at her. He was not admiring the throne room. He was watching her guards. There were 50 royal guards in the throne room, hidden in alcoves and behind pillars. They were the elite of the elite, trained since birth to protect the queen. They wore armor that could stop plasma fire and carried weapons that could cut through starship hulls. The human soldier had found 47 of them in less than a minute. Interesting. "Your Majesty?" Ambassador Park's voice pulled the queen back to the conversation. "Forgive me," Nari said smoothly. "I was considering your words. They are compelling." She gestured to Lord Hyan. "Prepare quarters for our guests. We will discuss the details of this potential alliance over the coming days." The ambassador's smile widened. "You are most generous, Your Majesty." As the diplomats were led away, Queen Nari raised a hand. "A moment, Ambassador," Who was your guard? Park turned and looked at the soldier as if she had forgotten he existed. Oh, him. That is Sergeant Kang Taiho. He's part of our security detail. Just a sergeant? The Queen's eyebrow rose slightly. Yes, Your Majesty. Just a sergeant. The soldier Taiho met the Queen's eyes for the first time. His face showed nothing. No fear, no curiosity, no ambition. Just stillness, like the surface of a deep lake dot. Then he bowed his head slightly and followed the diplomats out of the throne room. Queen Nari watched him go. Something about him bothered her. Something she could not name. Lord Hyan, she said quietly. Yes, Your Majesty. Find out everything you can about Sergeant Kang Taiho. Lord Hyan bowed. At once, Your Majesty. That night, the Queen could not sleep. She walked through the palace gardens, surrounded by flowers that bloomed in colors humans could not see. The moons of her world hung overhead, 3 silver circles in a purple sky. She thought about the human soldier. In her 300 years, Nari had met thousands of warriors. Generals, admirals, champions, heroes. She had learned to read them like books. Their pride showed in how they walked. Their skill showed in how they moved. Their ambition showed in how they looked at her throne. But Kang Taiho showed nothing. He moved like water smooth, effortless, without wasted motion. His eyes had found their hidden guards faster than some of her own advisors could. Yet, he wore the armor of a common soldier. He held the rank of a nobody. Either humans were very strange, or there was something very wrong with this picture. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Lord Hyan's voice came through her communicator. Your Majesty, I have the information you requested. Report. There is very little, I'm afraid. Sergeant Kang Taiho, age 34 by human years. Born on Earth, in a region called Korea. Enlisted in the Earth Federation military at age 18. Current assignment, security detail for diplomatic missions. That's all? His service record is unusual, Your Majesty. Most of it is classified. Even our best intelligence networks cannot access it. The Queen stopped walking. Classified? A sergeant with a classified record? Yes, Your Majesty. It is highly irregular. Nari stood silent for a long moment. Around her, night flowers opened their petals and released sweet perfume into the air. But she did not notice. What about the war? She asked. The war with the Darkhan? I checked, Your Majesty. Sergeant Kang did serve during the war, but the details of his service are locked behind the highest security clearances humanity has. A sergeant, Nari repeated slowly. With the highest security clearances. Yes, Your Majesty. She ended the communication and stood alone in her garden. The flowers swayed in the gentle breeze. The moons continued their slow dance across the sky. Humans were indeed very strange. The next morning, Queen Nari summoned Ambassador Park to a private breakfast. The dining room was small by palace standards, only large enough to seat 50. Paintings of past queens lined the walls, their violet eyes watching from centuries past. Ambassador Park arrived with 2 aides and, of course, Sergeant Kang. He stood by the door while the others sat at the table. His eyes were already moving, mapping the room, finding the exits, noting the guards. I trust your quarters were comfortable, the Queen said, sipping from a cup of golden liquid. More than comfortable, Your Majesty, Park replied. Your hospitality is legendary, as is human resilience, I hear. Nari set down her cup. Tell me, Ambassador, how did your people survive the Darkhan War? Park's smile flickered for just a moment. We fought hard, Your Majesty. We lost many good people, but we refused to surrender. The Darkhan have destroyed species far older and more powerful than humanity. Their fleets number in the millions. Their soldiers feel no pain and no fear. The Queen leaned forward slightly. How did you beat them? We adapted, Your Majesty. Humans are good at that. Adapted. Nari let the word hang in the air. Interesting. She noticed that Sergeant Kang had not moved, had not reacted at all to the mention of the war he had apparently fought in. His face remained as blank as stone. Tell me about your guard, the Queen said suddenly. Park blinked. Sergeant Kang? He's just a soldier, Your Majesty. A good one, but just a soldier with a classified service record? The ambassador's face went pale. Your Majesty, I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Nari stood from her chair. Every eye in the room turned to her. I think you know exactly who you brought into my palace, Ambassador. And I think you were hoping I would not notice. Park opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The Queen walked slowly towards Sergeant Kang, her guards tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. But she waved them back. She stopped in front of the human soldier. Up close, she could see the scars on his hands, thin white lines that spoke of countless battles. She could see the slight gray at his temples, the weathered lines around his eyes. Who are you? She asked quietly. Who are you really? Kang Taiho looked at her. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes. Not fear, not ambition. Something older. Something heavier. I am a sergeant, Your Majesty, he said. His voice was calm and deep. Nothing more. I do not believe you. That is your choice. They stood there, Queen and soldier, for a long moment. The air between them felt thick with unspoken things. Finally, Nari stepped back. Very well, she said. Keep your secret, Sergeant. For now. She returned to her seat and resumed her breakfast as if nothing had happened. But her mind, The 5th day of negotiations began like the others. Ambassador Park and her team sat at a long table across from Valari ministers. They discussed trade agreements, military cooperation, and cultural exchanges. The talks were slow and careful. Each word measured like precious metal. Queen Nari sat at the head of the table, listening but rarely speaking. Her ministers handled the details. She handled the decisions, and she watched Sergeant Kang Taiho. He stood in his usual position near the door, hands clasped behind his back. His gray armor looked even more worn in the bright light of the negotiation chamber. Compared to her royal guards in their shining golden plates, he looked like a beggar at a feast. But his eyes were not a beggar's eyes. They moved constantly, tracking everyone in the room. They lingered on the windows, on the ventilation shafts, on the shadows behind pillars. He had mapped every exit, every hiding spot, every potential danger. Queen Nari had seen her best guards take minutes to do what he did in seconds. Your Majesty? She turned to find Lord Hyan watching her with concern. The ambassador has asked about the defense treaty, he said quietly. She wishes to know our terms. Nari nodded and addressed the table. The Valari Empire requires 3 things for a defense alliance. First, shared intelligence on Darkhan movements. Second, access to human weapons technology. Third, she paused. A demonstration of human combat capability. Ambassador Park frowned. A demonstration, Your Majesty? We have heard stories of human soldiers. Stories that seem exaggerated. The Queen let a slight smile cross her face. We wish to see for ourselves what humanity can do. I see. Park glanced at her aides, then at Sergeant Kang. What kind of demonstration did you have in mind? A simple sparring match. One of your soldiers against one of my guards. No weapons. No killing. Just a test of skill. The room went quiet. The Valari ministers exchanged knowing looks. Their guards were legends across the galaxy. Faster, stronger, and more skilled than any species they had encountered. A human fighting a Valari guard would be like a child fighting a giant, but Ambassador Park surprised them. She smiled. "We would be honored, Your Majesty." "Sergeant Kang?" All eyes turned to the soldier by the door. For the first time in 5 days, he moved from his position. He walked forward with that strange, water-smooth grace and stopped at the edge of the table. "Ambassador," he said. His voice was flat and motionless. "I don't think that's wise." "Nonsense," Park said. "The Queen has requested a demonstration. We should not refuse. With respect, Ambassador." "Sergeant." Park's voice hardened. "That is an order." Something flickered in Kang's eyes. Something like resignation. Then it was gone. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Queen Nari felt a strange twist in her stomach. She had expected the ambassador to hesitate, to make excuses, to find a way out. Instead, she had ordered her soldier into a fight. He could not win, unless she knew something the Queen did not. The demonstration was arranged for that afternoon. The palace's training arena was cleared of all but essential personnel. Queen Nari took her seat in the royal viewing box, surrounded by her ministers and advisors. Ambassador Park and her team sat nearby, their faces carefully neutral. The arena floor was a circle of white sand, 50 meters across. On one side stood Captain Do-hyun, the leader of the Royal Guard. He was tall even for a Valari, nearly 3 meters of muscle and skill. He had fought in 17 battles and killed over 200 enemies in personal combat. He was considered the finest warrior in the Empire. On the other side stood Sergeant Kang Tae-ho. He had removed his armor and wore only a simple gray uniform. Without the metal plates, he looked smaller, more human, more ordinary. Queen Nari leaned toward Ambassador Park. "Are you certain about this? We did not mean to suggest a fight to the death. If your man yields, we will accept it." Park smiled. "I appreciate your concern, Your Majesty, but I have faith in Sergeant Kang." "Faith in what?" Nari thought. In his ability to survive? Because there was no way he could win. Lord Hyan stood and raised his hand. "The rules are simple. No weapons. No killing strikes. The match ends when one fighter yields or is unable to continue. Do both fighters understand?" Captain Do-hyun bowed. "Yes, my lord." Sergeant Kang simply nodded. "Then, begin." Captain Do-hyun moved first. He crossed the arena in 3 great strides, his fist swinging toward Kang's head with enough force to shatter stone. The blow never landed. Kang shifted to the side, not a dodge. Just a small step, as if he were making room for someone to pass. Do-hyun's fist cut through empty air. Before the captain could recover, Kang's hand shot out and touched his elbow. Just touched it. Like a greeting between friends. Do-hyun's arm went limp. He stumbled, tried to swing with his other arm, but Kang was already moving. Another touch, this time to the shoulder. Another to the knee. Each contact was gentle, almost tender, and each one took something from the captain. Within 10 seconds, Do-hyun was on his knees. His arms hung useless at his sides. His legs would not support him. He looked up at the human standing before him with shock and disbelief in his violet eyes. "What? What did you do?" he gasped. Kang looked down at him without expression. "Pressure points," he said quietly. "Your nervous system is similar to ours. Different locations, but the same principle." He stepped back and bowed slightly. "The match is over." "I yield." The arena was silent. Queen Nari realized she was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She had just watched her finest warrior, her undefeated champion, be dismantled in 10 seconds by a human sergeant. A sergeant who had then yielded out of what looked like politeness. "Your Majesty." Lord Hyon's voice was barely a whisper. "Did you see that?" "I saw," she said. "How is that possible?" She had no answer. Ambassador Park stood and bowed toward the royal box. "I hope the demonstration was satisfactory, Your Majesty." Nari found her voice. "It was educational, Ambassador. Wonderful. If you'll excuse me, I should check on my sergeant." She descended to the arena floor where Kang was helping Captain Dolphine to his feet. The captain's arms were already recovering, the paralysis fading. But his pride would take longer to heal. I watched the human soldier carefully. His face showed nothing, no triumph, no pride, no satisfaction. If anything, he looked tired, like a man forced to do something he did not want to do. That night, the Queen summoned Ambassador Park to her private chambers. "Tell me about him," she said without greeting. "Tell me the truth." Park sat in the offered chair and folded her hands in her lap. "I have told you the truth, Your Majesty. Sergeant Kang is a member of our security detail. A security detail that includes a man who can defeat the finest warrior in my empire without breaking a sweat. We take security seriously." Nari stood and walked to her window. Outside, the three moons were rising, casting silver light across the palace gardens. "I pulled every string I have," she said quietly. "Called in every favor. I tried to access human military records. Do you know what I found?" "I cannot imagine, Your Majesty. Nothing." She turned to face the ambassador. "Not just classified records. Nothing. As far as your official databases are concerned, Sergeant Kan Tai-ho does not exist before his current assignment." Park's face remained calm. "Our record keeping is sometimes inconsistent. Do not insult me, Ambassador." The room fell silent. The two women stared at each other, one ancient and powerful, one young but unafraid. Finally, Park spoke. "Your Majesty, there are some things I cannot tell you. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't have the clearance. You are the ambassador." "Yes, and even ambassadors have limits." Nari considered this. "Then tell me what you can." Park was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "During the Dark-Hand War, humanity was losing. We were outgunned, outmanned, and outmaneuvered. Every battle cost us ships we could not replace and soldiers we could not spare. I know this. What you don't know is how close we came to extinction. There was a single moment, when everything hung in the balance. The Darkin had broken through our final defense line. Their fleet was heading for Earth. We had nothing left to stop them." The ambassador paused. "And then, they didn't come." "What do you mean?" "The Darkhan fleet stopped, turned around, retreated to their borders. Their forward command stations went silent. Their communication networks collapsed. In the space of 72 hours, the largest military force in the galaxy simply fell apart." Queen Nari felt a chill run down her spine. "What happened?" "We don't know. Not officially. There are rumors, theories, classified reports that only a handful of people have seen." Park looked toward the window. "But there is one thing everyone agrees on, and that is, whatever happened, it started in Darkhan territory. Something or someone got behind their lines. Hit targets that should have been untouchable. Killed leaders that should have been unreachable. Broke their command structure so completely that they could not recover. One person did all that? I don't know." Park stood and walked to the door. "But I know that Sergeant Kang was behind enemy lines during those 72 hours. And I know that he was the only human to come back alive." She opened the door, then stopped. "Your Majesty, you asked me to tell you what I could. I have done so. Now let me give you some advice. Speak. Stop investigating Sergeant Kang. Stop watching him. Stop trying to find out who he is." Park's eyes were deadly serious. Some questions should not be answered. Some legends should remain legends. Why? Because the answers might keep the palace was in chaos after the attack. Guards rushed through corridors. Ministers shouted orders. Servants cleaned blood from marble floors that had never known violence before. Queen Nari sat in her private study. Alone in the darkness, thought she had sent everyone away. The doctors who wanted to check her for injuries. The advisors who wanted to discuss security. The ministers who wanted to analyze what had happened. She needed silence. She needed to think. 12 assassins from the Midnight Brotherhood. 12 of the deadliest killers in the galaxy. They had penetrated her palace, bypassed her security, and nearly reached her throne. And one human had stopped them all. She kept seeing it in her mind. The way he moved. The way he killed. So smooth, so effortless, so utterly without hesitation. Like death itself had taken human form and walked through her throne room. Just a sergeant. Nothing more. The lie burned in her ears. A soft chime announced a visitor. Queen Nari waved her hand, and the door slid open to reveal Lord Hyan. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something she had never seen in him before. Fear. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. "I found something. Speak." Lord Hyan entered and closed the door behind him. He carried a small data tablet, which he clutched like it might explode at any moment. "After the attack, I resumed my investigation into Sergeant Kang. I reached out to every contact I have. Every spy, every informant, every intelligence network in the galaxy." He paused, swallowing hard. Most of them refused to talk. Some of them simply disappeared. But one of them, an old friend who owes me his life, told me about the archive. The archive? The Legends Archive, Your Majesty. It is an old database maintained by the Galactic Council. It records the names and deeds of warriors who have changed history. Nari leaned forward. "I have heard of this archive. It is supposed to contain records of the greatest fighters who ever lived." "Yes, and it is almost impossible to access. The security protocols are ancient and complex. But my contact had a key, a one-time access code that could open a single record. And you used it." Lord Hyan nodded slowly. "I searched for human soldiers from the Darkhan War. There were only 3 results. 2 were fleet commanders, famous admirals whose names are in every history book. And the 3rd? Lord Hyan's hands trembled as he handed her the tablet. "See for yourself, Your Majesty." Queen Nari took the tablet. The screen showed a single entry, marked with more warning symbols than she had ever seen on a document. Classification markers from 17 different governments. Security clearances that required the authority of heads of state to access. And at the top, a name. Kang Taiho, known designation, the Ghost of Orion. She read further, her heart beating faster with each line. More. Earth. Korea region. Date classified. Age. Approximately 34 standard years. Enlisted Earth Federation military. Record sealed by Executive Order. Service history. Extensive field operations in hostile territories. Details classified. Darkhan War. Single operative insertion behind enemy lines. Duration, 72 hours. Objectives, all completed. Casualties inflicted, unable to calculate. Estimated minimum based on enemy communications intercepts, 2,847. Confirmed kills. Note, subject is considered the single most effective combat asset in human history. Responsible for the systematic elimination of Darkhan High Command during the final days of the war. Subject's actions directly led to the collapse of enemy command structure and the subsequent Darkhan retreat. Current status: retired. Location: unknown. Considered extremely dangerous. Do not approach. Do not engage. Do not attempt to recruit. Final assessment. If you are reading this file, You have made a terrible mistake. Forget what you have learned. Burn this record, and pray that the ghost never learns you were looking." Queen Nari set the tablet down. Her hands were shaking. 2,847 kills. In 72 hours. Behind enemy lines, alone. And he had chosen to guard diplomatic missions as a sergeant. "Lord Hyan," she said, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "How accurate is this information?" "The archive has never been wrong, Your Majesty. Its records are maintained by the Galactic Council itself. They are considered absolute truth." Then, everything the ambassador told me was true, and probably incomplete. The Queen stood and walked to her window. Outside, the moons were setting, their light fading as dawn approached. In a few hours, the palace would return to normal. The blood would be cleaned, the damage repaired, the dead buried, but nothing would ever be the same. "He ended the war," she said quietly. "One man, alone. He walked into enemy territory and killed so many of their leaders that the entire command structure collapsed. It appears so, Your Majesty. And now he carries a sergeant's rank and guards diplomats." "Yes." Nari turned to face her advisor. "Why? Why would someone capable of that choose to be this?" Lord Hyan had no answer. The Queen spent the rest of the night reading everything the archive had on Kang Tai-ho. It was not much. The record was heavily censored, with entire sections blacked out. But what remained painted a picture that made her blood run cold. Before the war, he had been a Special Forces soldier, one of humanity's best. He specialized in infiltration, assassination, and what the humans delicately called high-value target elimination. He was deployed to impossible missions and always came back. Always completed his objectives. Then the Darkhan came. The early years of the war were a catalog of disaster for humanity. They lost colony after colony, fleet after fleet. The Darkhan seemed unstoppable. Their technology was superior, their numbers overwhelming, their cruelty without limit. Kang Tai-ho fought in the worst of it. He was there when the colony of New Seoul fell, its 3 million inhabitants slaughtered in a single night. He was there when the orbital stations around Mars were destroyed, killing his entire unit. He was there for the Battle of the Rim, when humanity's last fleet made its final stand, and then he disappeared. For 3 months, there was no record of him anywhere. No deployments, no communications, no sightings. The human military listed him as missing in action. Then the Darkhan High Command started dying. First, it was a general, found dead in his private chambers, killed by a blade no one saw coming. Then an admiral, assassinated aboard his flagship despite thousands of guards. Then a whole council of war leaders eliminated in a single night. The Darkhan began to panic. They doubled their security, tripled their patrols, surrounded their leaders with armies of protectors. It made no difference. The deaths continued. One by one, sometimes 2 or 3 in a single day, the commanders fell. The Darkhan called him a demon, a spirit of vengeance. They offered rewards for his capture that could have bought entire planets. They sent their best hunters to find him. None of them came back. By the time those 72 hours ended, the Darkhan military was in complete disarray. Their surviving leaders were too afraid to give orders. Their fleets sat motionless, waiting for commands that never came. Their soldiers, trained since birth to follow without question, had no one to follow. And then Kang Tai-ho walked out of enemy territory, alone, and reported for duty. He was offered medals, promotions, commands, everything humanity had to give. He refused it all. He asked for one thing, to be left alone. They gave him a sergeant's rank and a quiet assignment. He seemed to want nothing more. Until now. Queen Nari closed the file and sat in silence as the sun rose over her palace. She understood now. She understood what humanity had created, and what that creation had done to win their survival. And she understood why Ambassador Park had warned her to stop asking questions. Some men were soldiers. Some were warriors. Some were heroes. Kang Tai-ho was none of those things. He was something the galaxy had never seen before. A weapon that walked and talked and looked like a man, but was something else entirely. Something forged in the fires of genocide and quenched in the blood of an empire. The ghost of Orion. She should have been afraid. Any rational ruler would have been. Having such a weapon in her palace, walking freely among her people. It was madness, but Nari was not afraid. She was fascinated. She wanted to understand him. To know how a human, a member of a species that lived barely a century, that had only recently discovered the stars, could become this. What drove him? What broke him? What made him choose to be a sergeant when he could have been a king? She needed to know, and there was only one way to find out. That afternoon, Queen Nari did something she had never done before. She dismissed her guards, walked alone through her palace, and knocked on the door of a guest room. Sergeant Kang opened it. He did not look surprised to see her. He did not look anything. His face was the same blank mask it had always been. "Your Majesty," he said, "you should not be here alone. I know who you are." The words hung in the air between them. She watched his eyes, looking for something: fear, anger, resignation. She saw nothing. "I know you are the ghost of Orion," she continued. "I know what you did in the war. I know why the Dark Han retreated. I know everything." For a long moment, he did not respond. Then he stepped aside and gestured for her to enter. The room was simple. A bed, a chair, a small table. His armor hung neatly on a stand. His few possessions were arranged with military precision. Kang closed the door and turned to face her. "How much do you know?" "Enough. Enough. The archive still exists." "Your name, I." 3 days passed after Queen Nari's private conversation with Sergeant Kang. The negotiations continued, but everything had changed. The Valari ministers no longer looked at the human delegation with polite condescension. Now they looked with something closer to respect. And perhaps a little fear. Word of what had happened in the throne room had spread through the palace. 12 assassins killed by one man. The finest killers in the galaxy, stopped by a single human in worn gray armor. The servants whispered about it. The guards talked about it. The nobles argued about what it meant. Queen Nari ignored them all. She had her own concerns. Every morning, she watched from her balcony as Sergeant Kang trained in the palace gardens. He moved through forms she did not recognize, strikes and blocks and throws that flowed together like water. His movements were beautiful in a terrible way. Every gesture was designed to kill, but there was something else she noticed. Something that bothered her. He trained alone. Not by choice, she realized. Every time another person approached the garden while he trained, he stopped. He stepped back. He waited until they left before resuming. Like a dangerous animal that did not want to hurt anyone by accident. On the 4th morning, she decided to change that dot. She walked down to the garden as he was finishing his routine. Her guards followed at a distance, looking nervous. She waved them back. "Your Majesty," Kang said, stopping immediately. Sweat ran down his face, but his breathing was steady. "I apologize. I will leave you to your garden." "Stay," she said. "I would like to talk." He hesitated, then nodded. They walked together through paths lined with flowers that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grass. Birds sang in the trees, or what passed for birds on the Valari homeworld. "You train every morning," Nari observed. "Why? You are clearly skilled beyond any need for practice." "Habit, Your Majesty." "Some things become part of you after long enough." How long have you been training? Since I was 14 years old. 20 years. 20 years of preparing his body for violence. She tried to imagine what that would do to a person and found she could not. I read your file, she said. The one in the archive. He did not react. I assumed as much. It said you killed nearly 3,000 people in 3 days. Is that accurate? I didn't count. His voice was flat. The number doesn't matter. It matters to me. I'm trying to understand. Kang stopped walking. He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw real emotion on his face. Not anger, not sadness, but something else. Exhaustion that went beyond the physical. What do you want to understand, Your Majesty? How I did it? Why I did it? Whether the first enjoyed it? All of those things. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat on a nearby bench, as if his legs could no longer hold him. The great warrior, the ghost of Orion, suddenly looked very human, very mortal. During the war, he began slowly. The Dog Han killed everyone I ever loved. My family, my friends, my unit, everyone. I watched them die, one by one, and I couldn't stop it. Nari sat beside him. She did not speak. After Mars, after I lost the last of my brothers, something broke inside me. I stopped being afraid. I stopped being angry. I stopped being anything at all. He looked at his hands. I realized that the Darkhan weren't going to stop. They were going to kill every human in the galaxy. Not because they hated us, but because that's what they do. It's their nature. So you decided to stop them. I decided to make them afraid. His voice was quiet but hard. The Darkhan don't fear death. They don't fear pain. They don't fear superior numbers or firepower. But they fear what they don't understand. And they don't understand what happens when you push a human past his breaking point. What happens? Kang met her eyes. He becomes something that doesn't stop. Something that doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't feel. Something that just keeps coming, no matter what you do, until everyone who needs to die is dead. The Queen felt a chill despite the warm morning sun. And you became that. For 72 hours, yes. He looked away. I remember all of it. Every face. Every kill. Every moment. It never goes away. And afterward, I woke up in a human medical facility with 17 broken bones, 3 ruptured organs, and no memory of how I got there. They told me I had walked 200 kilometers through enemy territory to reach friendly lines. I don't remember any of it. Nari tried to imagine it. A man pushing so far past his limits that his body broke and his mind retreated, but his will kept him moving, kept him alive. Why didn't you accept the medals? She asked. The promotions? The recognition? Because none of it was heroic. His voice was bitter. Heroes save people. I just killed them. A lot of them. And the worst part is, he paused. The worst part is that I was good at it. Better than anyone has ever been. And every night when I close my eyes, I see their faces. All of them. Thousands of faces staring at me, asking me why. What do you tell them? Nothing. There's nothing to say. They sat in silence for a long while. The birds continued to sing. The sun rose higher. The garden grew warm and bright. Finally, Nari spoke. I have lived 300 years, Sergeant. In that time, I have seen countless warriors. Some were noble. Some were cruel. Most were somewhere in between. But I have never met anyone who carried their burden the way you do. My burden? Your guilt. She turned to face him. You carry the weight of every life you took. Every face you saw. Every moment of those 72 hours. You don't try to justify it or excuse it. You just carry it. What else can I do? You could have become hard, cold. You could have embraced what you did, called yourself a hero, accepted the praise. Many would have. I'm not a hero. No, she agreed. You're something more complicated. Something more human, in the truest sense of the word. He looked at her with surprise. Human? Your people live such short lives. You know that every choice matters, that every moment counts, that there is no time to waste on pretense or delusion. The man who killed 3,000 enemies in 3 days. He could have become a monster. Instead, he became a sergeant who guards diplomats and trains alone in quiet gardens. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying that I was wrong about you, Sergeant. When you first arrived, I thought you were nothing. An ordinary soldier beneath my notice. Then I thought you were a weapon, a dangerous tool that humanity had pointed at their enemies. And now? Now I see that you are neither. Nari stood and walked a few steps away, her back to him. You are a man who did terrible things because terrible things needed to be done. You bear the weight of those actions not because you must, but because you choose to. Because you believe that the lives you took deserve to be remembered. She turned back to face him. That is not weakness, Sergeant. That is strength. A different kind of strength than the galaxy usually celebrates, but perhaps a more important one. Kang stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his eyes, the armor cracking, the mask slipping. For just a second, she saw the young man he might have been. Before the war, before the killing, before he became a legend. No one has ever said anything like that to me, he said quietly. Then the galaxy has been blind. He stood slowly. For the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain. Off balance. Human in a way she had not seen before. Your Majesty, why does this matter to you? Why do you care about what I think or feel? Because I am going to sign an alliance with your people, she said. And when I do, I want to understand who I am allying with. Not the diplomats with their polished words. Not the generals with their military might. The people underneath. The ones who do impossible things and then have to live with the consequences. And what have you learned? That humanity is more dangerous than anyone realizes. Not because of your weapons or your technology or even your adaptability. She stepped closer to him. But because when everything is lost, when all hope is gone, you don't surrender. You don't retreat. You find someone like you, someone who can carry an impossible burden, and you point them at the enemy. That doesn't sound like a compliment. It's not. It's a warning. She smiled slightly. To myself, more than anyone. I should never have dismissed you, Sergeant. And I should never have underestimated your people. A distant bell chimed, signaling the hour. The morning was ending. Soon, the negotiations would resume, and they would both have to return to their roles, queen and guard, ruler and servant. But something had changed between them. Something small but important. Sergeant Kang, Nari said formally. I have a request. Name it, Your Majesty. When the alliance is signed and your delegation leaves, I would like you to stay. As an advisor. Someone who can teach my people what it truly means to deal with humanity. He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he shook his head. I can't do that. Why not? Because I'm tired, Your Majesty. The words came out heavy, weighted with years of exhaustion. I've been tired for a long time. When this mission is over, I'm going to find somewhere quiet. Somewhere without wars or politics or legends. Somewhere I can be ordinary again. Is that possible? For someone like you? I don't know. But I have to try. He met her eyes. I appreciate the offer. More than you know. But the ghost of Orion needs to die. Completely this time. And the only way that happens is if I disappear. Nari nodded slowly. She understood. Better than he knew, she understood. "Then I will not ask again," she said. "But I want you to know something." "What is that?" "If the grand hall of the Valari Palace had been transformed. Banners of gold and silver hung from the ceiling. Musicians played ancient songs of celebration. Thousands of courtiers, diplomats, and nobles filled the space, their voices creating a symphony of excitement and anticipation. Today, history would be made. Queen Nari sat upon her throne, dressed in ceremonial robes that had been worn by 100 queens before her. The black crystal caught the light and scattered it like stars. Her silver crown sat heavy on her head, a reminder of the weight she carried. Before her stood the human delegation. Ambassador Park wore a formal gown of deep blue, the colors of Earth's oceans. Her aides flanked her, carrying documents and ceremonial items, and behind him, in his usual position, stood Sergeant Kan Taiho. He had cleaned his armor for the occasion. The scratches and dents remained, but the metal shone in the light. His face was as blank as ever, but Nari knew what lay beneath that mask now. She had seen it. She understood it. Lord Hines stepped forward and addressed the assembly. "We are gathered today to witness a historic moment. The signing of an alliance between the Valari Empire and the Earth Federation. May this partnership bring peace and prosperity to both our peoples." Ambassador Park approached the throne and bowed. "Your Majesty, on behalf of humanity, I present this Treaty of Alliance. May it be the first step toward a future of cooperation and mutual respect." She placed a golden scroll on the table before the Queen. The terms have been negotiated over weeks of careful discussion. Military cooperation, trade agreements, cultural exchange, technology sharing, everything that two civilizations needed to work together. But Queen Nari did not pick up the scroll immediately. Instead, she stood and addressed the assembly. "Before I sign this treaty," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "I wish to speak about what this alliance means." The crowd fell silent. Even the musicians stopped playing. When humanity first requested an audience with us, I admit I was skeptical. Your species is young. Your technology is limited. Your lifespans are short. By every measure the galaxy uses to judge civilizations, you should be insignificant. She paused, letting the words sink in. I was wrong. A murmur ran through the crowd. The Valari were not accustomed to hearing their queen admit mistakes. During your stay in my palace, I learned many things about humanity. I learned about your resilience, your adaptability, your refusal to surrender even when all hope seems lost. Her eyes found Kang Taiho in the crowd. I learned about the price you pay for that strength. She descended the steps of her throne and walked toward the human delegation. The crowd parted before her like water. You carry your burden silently, she continued. You do not boast of your victories or celebrate your heroes the way other species do. Instead, you remember your losses. You honor your fallen. You let your legends fade into obscurity because they ask for nothing more. She stopped in front of Ambassador Park. This is what makes humanity different. Not your weapons. Not your technology. Your humanity. Nari turned to face the assembly once more. I have ruled for 300 years. In that time, I have signed treaties with dozens of species. Most of those treaties were about power, who had it, who wanted it, how to balance it. But this treaty is different. She walked to the table where the golden scroll waited. This treaty is not just about military strength or economic benefit. It is about respect. True respect between two peoples who see each other clearly. She picked up a ceremonial pen, a device that would encode her genetic signature into the document, making it unbreakable. But before she signed, she spoke one final time. The Valari Empire has stood for 10,000 years because we are strong. We have the finest warriors, the greatest ships, the most advanced technology. But strength alone does not make a civilization great. She looked at Kang Taiho. What makes a civilization great is how it treats its warriors after the war is over, how it remembers its sacrifices, how it carries its burdens. She turned back to the scroll. By that measure, humanity is already great, and it is my honor to stand beside you. She signed the treaty. The hall erupted in applause. Musicians struck up celebratory music. Nobles rushed forward to offer congratulations. The diplomats shook hands and exchanged formal greetings. In the chaos, Queen Nari made her way through the crowd to where Sergeant Kang stood alone. He had not moved from his position, had not joined the celebration, had not smiled or cheered or shown any reaction at all. "It is done," she said quietly, standing beside him. "Yes, Your Majesty. You should be celebrating. Your mission is complete." "I don't celebrate, Your Majesty." "Not anymore." She nodded. She had expected as much. "Your ship leaves tomorrow?" "Yes. Ambassador Park has been recalled to Earth. My assignment ends when she arrives safely." "And then?" He did not answer immediately. He watched the celebration with distant eyes, seeing something she could not see, remembering something she could not know. "And then I disappear," he said finally, "like I should have done years ago." Nari felt a strange sadness settle over her heart. She had known this man for only a few weeks. She had seen him fight only once. She had spoken with him privately just twice. And yet somehow, saying goodbye felt like losing something important. "Sergeant Kang," she said formally, "on behalf of the Valari Empire, I thank you for your service during these negotiations. Your protection was invaluable. Your sacrifice will be remembered." He turned to look at her. "My sacrifice? You gave up your peace to be here. You returned to the world of politics and power that you wanted to leave behind. You did it because your people needed you. I did it because I follow orders." "No," she shook her head. "You did it because you care. About your people. About humanity. About the future. You pretend to be empty, Sergeant. But I see through you now. I see the man underneath the ghost." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You see too much. Your Majesty, I have had 300 years of practice." They stood together in the middle of the celebration. Two unlikely figures surrounded by noise and joy. A queen of an ancient empire. A ghost of a forgotten war. Both carrying burdens they would never set down. "I meant what I said," Nari told him. "About your place here. The offer stands forever. I know. Will you take it? Someday?" He considered the question. Really considered it. Not with the automatic dismissal she had seen before. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been running for so long, I'm not sure I know how to stop." "Then learn?" She reached out and took his hand, a breach of protocol that would scandalize her advisors for years. "Learn how to rest. How to heal. How to be something other than a weapon. And when you're ready, come back." His hand was warm in hers. Scarred and calloused and marked by years of violence. But human. Wonderfully, impossibly human. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. "Why do you care about what happens to me?" "Because someone should." She squeezed his hand gently. "Because you saved my life. Because you carry your burden with more grace than anyone I have ever met. And because..." She hesitated. "Because I believe you deserve peace. Real peace. Not just the absence of war." He looked at their joined hands. Then at her face. Something shifted in his expression, the mask slipping one final time, showing the exhausted, broken, hopeful man underneath. "Thank you," he said. And for the first time since she had met him, the words sounded like they meant something. The celebration continued around them. Music played. People danced. Treaties were toasted and futures were promised. The alliance between humanity and the Volari was official, sealed by signatures and ceremonies that would echo through history. But for Queen Nari, the moment that mattered most was this one. Standing in the middle of a crowd with a tired soldier, holding his hand, offering him something more valuable than any treaty. Hope. The next morning, she stood on the landing platform as the human shuttle prepared to depart. Ambassador Park thanked her formally. The aides bowed and made appropriate noises. The guards saluted and took their positions. Sergeant Kang was the last to board. He paused at the shuttle door and looked back at her. The wind from the engines tugged at his gray armor. His face was calm as always, unreadable as always, but his eyes told a different story. He raised his hand, not a salute, not a wave, just a simple gesture of acknowledgement, of connection, of something that might someday be called friendship. They turned and disappeared into the shuttle. Queen Nari watched the ship rise into the sky, climb through the atmosphere, and vanish among the stars. She watched until there was nothing left to see but the endless blue above. Then she returned to her palace, to her throne, to her duties as ruler of an empire that had stood for 10,000 years. But she was different now. The alliance had changed things, not just politically, but personally. She had seen something in humanity that she had not expected to find. Something worth protecting, worth nurturing, worth believing in. And she had seen something in one human in particular. A man who had been broken by war and rebuilt himself into something new. Something quiet. Something humble. Something that asked for nothing and gave everything. The ghost of Orion. No, not the ghost. Just Kang Taiho, the man. 5 years later, a message arrived at the palace.